It was ruthless, brutal, and extremely violent. It began on a small island, and within a few decades dominated the organised crime scene of entire countries. It was synonymous of money and power. Movies and songs have been dedicated to it. What has happened to the Sicilian Mafia? As mentioned in the previous video, shockingly, in 1968 and in 1969, two tribunals freed most of the mafiosi, condemning only a few bosses to very light sentencing for minor crimes. In Sicily, several politicians welcomed these sentences, confirming that the mafia was only an idiotic invention of newspapers and the media. The first task undertaken by the mafia was to reconstruct the previous structure, including the commission, in order to fix the disagreements amongst clans, settle any pending issues arising from the First Mafia War, and restart at full force their businesses, which were languishing after the First Mafia War. It was in these years that one clan was particularly active. Unknown to most until a few years back, Corleonezi, led by Luciano Leggio, started to have a key role in restructuring and modernising the Sicilian Mafia. Despite the usual activities and cigarette smuggling were already flourishing and injecting large sums of money into families' pockets, several clans with affiliates overseas understood that something new and extremely lucrative could have been done: refining and smuggling heroin all over the world. By 1975, Sicily had the highest number of refineries for heroin, creating a sort of monopoly in Europe. The port of Palermo was the main infrastructure of all this traffic, moving at least 80% of all the heroin trade in the world. A large quantity of heroin was exported to North America, where families in the main cities of the United States were selling heroin in the streets. Paradoxically, the clans more organised and better positioned in the market were those targeted by police during the First Mafia War, since they already had affiliations in Canada, the United States and other countries. It was under these circumstances that Tommaso Buscetta was nicknamed the boss of the two worlds, since he had strong ties to Sicilian families and American clans. However, despite for some families, the heroin business was a goldmine and money was pouring in. Few clans were still involved in smaller and less lucrative activities, creating some sort of inequality inside the commission. Luciano Leggio, boss of the Corleone family, a clan cut off from the heroin business, started to replace members of the commission in order to increase his power and the authority of Corleonezi inside the highest organ of mafia. Arrested and imprisoned in 1974, Leggio left the scene and the clan of Corleonezi was in the hand of Leggio's former right-hand man, Salvatore Riina, commonly referred to as Toto Riina. Together with his right-hand men, Bernardo Provenzano and Leoluccia Bagarella, Riina carried on Leggio's smart policy of reducing other families' power in the commission. Riina's approach was as brutal as smart and effective. For instance, he ordered murders of policemen in the territory of other clans with the intent of sabotaging their influence with the corrupt institutions and politicians. He set up murders with the intent to mislead families, break up alliances, and commence a war against each other. Secretly, the Corleonesi were contacting other families to recruit allies in Palermo, such as Calo, Marchesi and the Riccobono clans, forming a formidable alliance from a military and firepower perspective. The strategy was as simple as effective. All the families left out from the profitable business of heroin should ally and focus on arming themselves in view of a sort of coup d'etat of mafia. From a financial perspective, for Corleonezi, it was impossible to take down the other rich families of Palermo. The clans heavily involved in heroin trade did not realise that mafia was changing from within, and a new, ruthless faction was already formed, rolling and ready to take over the entire empire. Two worlds were about to collide. The new, emerging military power with brutal and ambitious bosses such as Riina, Provenzano, Bagarella, Carlo representing the Corleonesi clan, and its allied families from poorer areas of Palermo, against the traditional and wealthy faction composed of Bontade, Badalamenti, Di Stefano, Buscetta and Inzarillo clans. Perfect money-making machines, but rather weak from a firepower perspective. Despite several celebrity killings towards the end of the 1970s, the Second Mafia War, or the Great Mafia War, began in 1981, with the assassination of Stefano Bontade, head of the Bontade family, arguably the richest clan in Sicily. After 3 weeks, Salvatore Inzarillo was murdered by the tremendous Corleonesi's firepower and its efficient killers. In other words, in less than 1 month, the two most successful and powerful, as well as wealthiest leaders of mafia, are killed under Riina's orders. Engagement rules from Corleonezi's side were ferocious and barbaric. Not only bosses and affiliated had to die, but also relatives and whoever were giving external support to them, such as doctors, lawyers, accountants. The rivals were to disappear once and for all, and with them also the consultants, relatives and friends. Along the streets of Palermo and other Sicilian towns, mafiosi were dying at an unprecedented rate, and often also non-mafiosi were victims of the crossfire. Within 12 months, according to several studies, more than 900 people died in Sicily, either murdered down the streets or disappeared forever without leaving any trace. But Sicily was not the only place where this war was being fought. In New York, New Jersey, and other cities across the United States, the American allies of the old Sicilian Mafia clans started to count victims too. In 1982, Riina increased the level of the conflict. When he realized that most of his rivals were on the verge of disappearing for good, he gave the order to also crash Corleonezi's new allies. All the clans from Palermo which switched sides before the war or during the first year needed to be wiped out too. This move left the investigators, public opinion, and policemen completely vacillating. In addition, since 1979, Corleonesi clan commenced a parallel campaign, and now Italian institutions and their representatives were the targets. Within a few years, chiefs of police departments, anti-mafia judges, journalists and politicians were gunned down by killers acting upon Riina's orders. Such bloodshed has never been seen in Sicily or anywhere else before such a mafia war. What infuriated most the public opinion was the fact that, despite this declaration of war towards the state, several members of the institutions were still secretly collaborating with the mafia. For instance, following the deaths of several politicians and senior police officials, General Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa was relocated to Palermo with the intent to fight Cosa Nostra on its own turf. Dalla Chiesa was a general of Carabinieri who managed to achieve outstanding results in fighting Red terrorism, the Italian left-handed domestic terrorism, close to the Communist Party. Humble and highly capable, he had been promised by the state that he would have made available the relevant military personnel, and he would have the full powers and autonomy. Several politicians were trying to make merit from this move in order to increase their visibility and sympathy of electors. However, after just a few weeks of his arrival in Palermo, Dalla Chiesa stated that he had been left alone. "I am here with this phone, which has not been ringing for days," he said to a journalist, who was shocked to be able to walk to his office without any security or control. Dalla Chiesa was murdered together with his wife 100 days after taking office in Palermo. Yes, it was them, Corleonesi family, with Riina's signature all over their corpses. Until 1983, in the whole legal system of Italy, composed of hundreds of thousands of laws, there was no mention of the word mafia or related terms. Only after the murder of Dalla Chiesa and another excellent victim, Pio La Torre, the Italian Parliament adopted a law by which colluding with or being related to the mafia was a crime. In addition, the same law provided for immediate confiscation of money, goods or assets if the suspected owner could have been related or in business with the mafia. Furthermore, in 1983, Rocco Chinnici, an anti-mafia judge in Palermo, had a brilliant idea. Since mafia was murdering all the judges who were conducting investigations, again the Corleonesi clans causing continuous delays, Chinnici thought that if the investigations were carried out by a group of prosecutors, mafia would have had severe difficulties in killing all of them simultaneously. A team is harder to gun down, and the survivors would have had enough time to find new joiners, giving continuity to the investigation without slowing down the work. This idea cost the life of Chinnici, who was murdered once again by the Corleonesi family. However, this time, the mistake was made by the apparently victorious side of the Second Mafia War. Despite the fact Riina was clearly winning the war against his mafiosi rivals, Corleonesi did not realise that something was changing within the institutions of Italy. The Italian government started to offer special protection to those who were keen to turn against Corleonesi, providing valuable information to judges and police. Amongst them, there was one in particular who, in 1984, after being arrested in Brazil, decided to become a pentito, a turncoat. We've already heard his name, Don Tommaso Buscetta. For the first time in mafia history, a top-notch boss decided to collaborate with the justice and open his book, revealing in 45 days what police could not understand after decades of investigation. Rituals, names, events, structures, and more. The most relevant information has been decoded, and mafia for the first time was real and naked. Nobody could deny its existence anymore. In addition, Riina and his affiliates were too busy massacring rivals, judges and armed forces officials to realise that each significant victim had only made stronger and more determined the newcomers. Especially two new judges who, after being promoted, joined the newly established anti-mafia pool, created on Chinnici's idea, Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino. And that's the end of part 2. We hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, please comment, like and subscribe below and turn on your alerts. We'll see you soon.